From a sanitarium with an underground body chute where dead bodies were transported to a town hall that hosted executions during the infamous witch trials, America has no shortage of haunted places to visit. Sloss furnaces operated as a blast furnace that produced steel from the 1880s until the 1970s, helping turn Birmingham into the largest metropolitan area in Alabama. However, the legend goes that in the early 1900s, a notoriously cruel foreman named James Slag Wormwood ran the graveyard shift with an iron fist. He forced his skeleton crew to work all hours of the night in stifling 120-degree heat to keep the furnace fed. It's said that Slag's dangerous management led to the death of 47 workers during his time as foreman, with many others being seriously hurt or even permanently disabled. In 1906, Slag met his end when he slipped and fell into the largest furnace, known as Big Alice, and melted instantly in the molten ore. There's much speculation over whether this was truly an accident. Afterwards, workers began complaining of a demonic presence urging them to work harder and even physically shoving or burning them. There are more than 100 reports of encounters with the paranormal at Sloss, something local news investigators could not disprove.
Our equipment was going crazy.
I mean, you can see that says killed right there.
The Red Onion Saloon in Skagway, Alaska is a restaurant and bar where you can eat pizza and nachos. But when it was built in the gold rush of 1897, it was known as the finest saloon, dance hall, and brothel in town. The first floor of the building contained the saloon, while the upstairs contained the 10 rooms of the brothel. Interested customers would approach the bars of the saloon, behind which were placed 10 dolls that represented the 10 sex workers upstairs. A doll sitting upright was available, while a doll lying down was, well, probably lying down. The most famous of all the sex workers of the Red Onion is Lydia, who has apparently continued to stick around to this very day. Visitors of the Red Onion report encountering Lydia as footsteps overhead, the scent of perfume, cold spots, and even as a full-form apparition walking around her former room. It's also said that Lydia waters and tends to the plants of the Red Onion. The saloon offers both walking tours of Skagway and an in-house tour of the Brothel Museum, in which they say people might encounter her. The Jerome Grand Hotel in Jerome, Arizona was originally built in 1926 as a United Verde hospital and operated as such until it was closed in 1950. After that, it stood unused until it reopened as a hotel in 1996. More than 9,000 people reportedly died on those grounds in its time as a hospital, which may contribute to its reputation as the most haunted place in Arizona. The general manager says that they began experiencing reports of strange activity as soon as they opened, including disembodied voices and sightings of hospital gurneys in the hallways. Since that time, the manager says he fills a 300-page journal every year with reports of ghostly happenings in the hotel. The majority of activity reportedly happens on the third floor, where the operating room once stood. People hear the sound of rolling gurney wheels and feel the ghost of a cat jumping on their bed and walking around. The most reported room is room 32, where 2 suicides allegedly took place. Additionally, the elevator is said to be haunted by the ghost of a maintenance man who was crushed by the elevator car in 1935. The Crescent Hotel in Eureka Springs, Arkansas bills itself on its website as America's most haunted hotel, and they offer a number of legends to back that claim up. The hotel was built as a luxury resort in 1886, but it also spent some time serving as a women's college. In the 1930s, the hotel was purchased by a man named Norman Baker, a snake oil salesman who converted the hotel into a so-called health resort, where he claimed to have cures for any number of diseases, including cancer. The horrors of Baker's medical malpractice led to numerous deaths, which are said to be the cause of the hotel's many hauntings today. Among the more famous apparitions are Michael, a stonemason who died in the hotel's construction and still hangs out in room 218, a ghostly cancer patient seen on the 4th floor fumbling with keys and cleaning up after untidy guests, and a spectral 4-year-old who died of appendicitis seen bouncing a ball in the halls. The Whaley House in San Diego, California has the reputation as the most haunted house in America. There was even a feature film in 2012 called The Haunting of Whaley House. So what's the scoop?
There has been more blood spilt on the property.
More blood?
The house was built by Thomas Whaley in 1856 to be the most elegant house in Southern California. In addition to being a family home, it also served as a courthouse, a theater, and a general store. However, the site of the home was also the spot on which notorious horse thief Yankee Jim Robinson had been executed, and this deadly act seemed to have tainted the location. Soon after the Whaleys moved in, their 18-month-old son Thomas died of scarlet fever. Later, the Whaley daughter Victoria would commit suicide in the house. Visitors to the Whaley House Museum have encountered most of the family as ghosts. Thomas and his wife are said to manifest as the unexplained odor of cigar smoke and perfume. The melancholy Victoria appears as a ghost in a long dress in an upstairs bedroom, and the giggles and footsteps of baby Thomas are a constant presence. The most famous haunted hotel in all of horror literature and film is the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado. The hotel was the brainchild of inventor Freeland Oscar Stanley, who had gone out to the fresh air of Colorado in the hopes of curing his tuberculosis. When the hotel opened in 1909, it was a modern marvel and a luxury destination for travelers to the Western Mountains. However, it had fallen into considerable disrepair by the 1970s when it was visited by author Stephen King, and the nightmares he experienced in the notorious Room 217 inspired his book The Shining.
We were the only people in that hotel, and the wind was whistling outside, the rooms were all empty.
The Stanley's reputation for paranormal activity has only increased in the years since The Shining and its film adaptation came out, with the ghosts of Stanley and his wife being commonly cited apparitions. Ghosts of children are said to run the halls, and there's reportedly a haunted pet cemetery and cave system under the hotel. Dudleytown is an old colonial village in the forests of Connecticut that is now abandoned after earning a reputation as being cursed. According to legend, the village was established by the Dudley family in the 1700s, but they brought a curse with them that has subsequently brought ruin upon anyone who has tried to live there. Stories include a massacre by Native Americans, death by lightning strike, epidemics, suicides, madness, and more. By 1880, they say the village had been deserted by everyone except one man, who was later found roaming the woods in shredded clothing and babbling about demons. In the years since that time, the area around Dudleytown has become notorious as a hotbed for paranormal activity. Ed and Lorraine Warren of the Conjuring fame declared the woods around Dudleytown officially demonically possessed in the 1970s. You'll have to take their word for it, though, as Dudleytown has been closed to the public since the 1990s. Fort Delaware was originally built in 1859 as a harbor defense, but soon became a prison for Confederate soldiers during the Civil War. Fort Delaware was notorious at the time for its treatment of soldiers, with the commanding officer at the facility gaining the nickname General Terror. Some 13,000 prisoners were held in terrible conditions with rotting food, impotable water, and rampant disease and malnutrition, not to mention the tortures enacted by guards upon the prisoners. Around 2,700 men are said to have died in these hellish conditions, so it's not a huge surprise that legends say that many of their spirits have hung around. The fort, now a state park, offers ghost seekers an hours-long tour of the grounds, in which you can tour the barracks, mess hall, officers' quarters, and tunnel system. The sci-fi series Ghost Hunters investigated the fort in 2008 and heard ghostly cannon fire in the tunnels, as well as rattling chains, in addition to visual and even tactile experiences. The lead investigator from Ghost Hunters called St. Augustine Lighthouse the Mona Lisa of paranormal sites. The lighthouse was the first one built by the new American territorial government after Florida had been purchased from the Spanish in 1824, on the site of an old Spanish watchtower that dates back to the 16th century. The stretch of land on which the lighthouse stands today has seen piracy, war, shipwrecks, slave hunters, Nazis, and more. It's no surprise that with such a storied history that the lighthouse is said to be so haunted. Some of the most famous spirits at the lighthouse are the ghosts of 3 children who drowned while playing near the lighthouse. And the official St. Augustine Lighthouse website says the playful spirits of these children still pull off spooky pranks on the site to this day. Other ghosts include the terrifying Man in Blue, a violent poltergeist believed to be a former lighthouse keeper. Savannah, Georgia has a reputation as one of the most haunted cities in America, and the most haunted place in that haunted city is surely Bonaventure Cemetery. Made famous thanks to the 1994 novel Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil and its film adaptation, it's hard to look at the grounds with their sprawling, gnarled oaks covered in dangling Spanish moss and not get a little chill up your spine. The Southern Gothic vibes of the place are only enhanced by the numerous sculptures and monuments that surround the graves, including the famous Bird Girl sculpture from the novel. Another famous sculpture accompanies the cemetery's most famous ghost, that of little Gracie Watson, the daughter of a local hotel manager who died of pneumonia at just 6 years old in 1889. Visitors claim to have seen the little girl's ghost sitting by her grave and blood flowing from the statue's eyes. Other reported phenomena include the sound of infants crying near babies' graves, strange laughing, unseen dogs barking, and sculptures smiling or grimacing at people. The most famous haunted area in Hawaii is the Pali Highway on the island of Oahu, which runs from downtown Honolulu through mountains and tunnels to the windward coast. Legends from this stretch of road include a ghostly old woman and a dog who will appear and make your car stall if you try to carry pork across the island. Honolulu Magazine records that there are many famously haunted spots along the highway, including Morgan's Corner, the site of a real murder where tales of more legendary murders are common, sacred ruins where the spirits of ancient warriors are said to frequent, a Chinese cemetery with a haunted tree, where the ghost of a girl who committed suicide can reveal which men have been unfaithful, and Iolani Palace, haunted by the ghost of Queen Liliuokalani. The old Idaho State Penitentiary began in 1870 as a sign of an establishment of law in a territory angling for statehood. Before long, however, the jail had its prisoners working in a stone quarry to mine the very rocks that would be used to imprison them. Eventually, the penitentiary was made up of numerous buildings, all surrounded by a tall sandstone wall. For the next century, this prison would be home to over 13,000 convicts, both men and women, more than 100 of whom died within its walls of causes both natural and not. The prison became notorious both for its brutal conditions as well as its dangerous criminals, including Raymond Allen Snowden, known as Idaho's Jack the Ripper. Due to its violent history, it's no surprise that the old Idaho State Penitentiary has gained a reputation as the state's most haunted building since its closure in 1973. And Five House, the building where Snowden was executed in 1957, is said to be especially haunted by the ghost of the old murderer. Bachelor's Grove Cemetery, just outside Chicago in Midlothian, Illinois, is famous for just straight up having ghosts out the wazoo. The small graveyard was built around 1840 as part of a short-lived settlement and was abandoned around the turn of the 20th century. Since that time, the legends surrounding the 82-plot graveyard have only grown as it has attracted grave robbers, vandals, ghost hunters, and according to legend, cultists and mobsters dumping bodies. Reported phenomena at Bachelor's Grove include a ghost dog with red eyes that chases people off the grounds, a ghostly farmer with a phantom horse, spectral vehicles with no drivers, glowing orbs, dark figures in hooded robes, and a two-headed pond monster. There's also a shimmering, floating phantom farmhouse that appears and disappears at random, never in the same part of the graveyard twice. Most famous, however, is the woman in white, known as the Madonna of Bachelor's Grove, seen carrying her baby around the graveyard under the full moon.
So is Amelia here looking for her child that's buried here and not with the rest of the family is one of the possibilities.
The French Lick Springs Hotel in French Lick, Indiana, was originally developed in 1845 by Dr. William Bowles as a health resort capitalizing on the area's natural sulfur springs. In 1888, however, the property was bought by the town's mayor, Thomas Taggart, who turned the health resort into luxury accommodations. The hotel got a major restoration in 2006 and has become a popular travel destination ever since. The most frequently seen ghost is that of Thomas Taggart himself, who is often seen doing all the jobs he used to do as proprietor of the hotel, riding the service elevator up and down or riding a horse down the 6th floor hallways. The other most commonly reported spirit is a bellhop that many guests assume is a current employee until they see his picture in old photographs of the hotel. With a name like the Villisca Axe Murderer House, you know it's got to be haunted. In 1912, 8 people, including Josiah and Sarah Moore, their 4 children and 2 visiting children, were killed by an unknown assailant with an axe. Besides the disturbingly grisly nature of the crime itself, which spawned a feature film in 2017, the mystery of the event is compounded by strange details, like the fact that the door was locked from the inside, all the windows and mirrors in the house were covered with cloth, and the house contains a secret attic. More than a century later, the crime remains unsolved. The spirits of the restless dead continue to cry out in turmoil, or so they say. Apparitions within the murder house include strange giggling sounds, disembodied screams, a mysterious fog that appears and moves from room to room at the time of the murders, and visitors to the house beginning to act strangely. The house today is open as a kind of murder hotel, where guests can rent out the house to stay overnight in hopes of spying a ghost. The most haunted place in Kansas is the so-called Sallie House, which was the home of a local physician. According to legend, the Sallie who gives the house its name was a young girl whose mother brought her to the doctor's home with abdominal pain. The doctor believed she had appendicitis and, hurrying due to the severity of her pain, began operating before the anesthetic had a chance to take hold, causing the girl to die screaming in pain on the operating table. According to the Atchison tourism website, paranormal activity at the house started to increase in the 1990s, when a young couple rented the house and experienced cold spots, objects moving by themselves, unexplained scratches on their bodies, mysterious fires, and their dog growling in seemingly empty corners. Today, the house is available for tours, but visitors have to sign a waiver, as Sallie's ghost is said to occasionally get violent, especially towards men.
I don't know if I was feeling sadness, hate, anger, excitement. All I know is I was just like, someone got me like that.
The hottest hotbed of supernatural activity in Kentucky is the Waverly Hills Sanatorium. Waverly was built in the early 20th century in an attempt to provide a place of rest and convalescence for victims of tuberculosis, which was an incurable scourge at the time. Their main approach to trying to fight the deadly disease was rest, sunlight, and good vibes. Despite this, people died in the facility on an almost daily basis until the facility closed in 1961. Since that time, the abandoned facility has become known as an epicenter for the spirits of those who died of the disease, especially in the underground tunnel known as the body chute, through which the bodies of the dead were transported.
In an attempt to hide the deaths from other patients, they built a tunnel 500 feet long in concrete to wheel bodies out.
The 5th floor is especially reputed to be haunted, where multiple nurses are said to have met their end at their own hand. Other sightings include a ghostly hearse, a woman with bleeding wrists, and a man in a white coat. Perhaps the most notorious spot in Louisiana for ghosts is about 100 miles outside of New Orleans in St. Francisville at the Myrtles Plantation. According to the Myrtles Plantation website, the site is home to as many as 12 different ghosts, and according to legend was the location of 10 different murders. Naturally, any plantation is going to have a pretty fraught history, so the idea that stories of violence would pop up around it isn't too surprising. Probably the most famous ghost of Myrtles is Chloe, who is said to have been a young enslaved girl forced into a relationship with her owner, Clark Woodruff. When Chloe was caught spying at keyholes, Woodruff cut one of her ears off. In revenge, Chloe poisoned Woodruff's wife and children, for which she was hanged. To this day, there are numerous sightings of Chloe wearing the green turban she famously donned to cover up her missing ear. York, Maine is the oldest incorporated city in America, under the charter of King Charles I in 1642. And the facility now known as the Museums of Old York is known as one of the most haunted spots in Maine. New England, of course, is notorious for its witch trials, and York didn't escape witch mania. The current site of the museum was formerly the town hall where public executions were carried out in the town. The most famous entity of Old York is the so-called White Witch, who is believed to be the ghost of one of the women executed during the witch trials. Visitors report doors opening and closing by themselves, cold spots, objects moving on their own, and of course, full visual apparitions of the White Witch herself walking down the streets of the town or even playing with children at the playground. The bloodiest battle and the bloodiest war on U.S. soil was the 1862 Battle of Antietam on a creek near Sharpsburg, Maryland. As the U.S. Department of Transportation explains, this Civil War battle was only 4 hours long, but saw the death or wounding of over 23,000 men who fought on a sunken road that separated two farm properties. Such violence, of course, begets legends of ghosts, echoes of the deaths that took place there. And the Antietam battlefield is home to numerous tales of hauntings and apparitions. The road where bodies fell on top of bodies is today known as Bloody Lane, and visitors have reported seeing the ghosts of soldiers marching up and down it, as well as smelling unexplained clouds of gunpowder. More strangely, there have been reports of disembodied singing heard floating around Bloody Lane. Burnside's Ridge, the site of many unmarked graves, is said to be home to strange balls of blue light and the mysterious sound of drums. Multiple buildings on the site of the battleground, including a church used as a hospital, bear a reputation for ghostly sights and sounds as well. While the whole town of Salem, Massachusetts is famous for both witches and ghosts, one home in particular stands out as especially haunted, the Turner Ingersoll Mansion, perhaps better known thanks to the Nathaniel Hawthorne novel inspired by it as The House of the Seven Gables. Turner Ingersoll was once the home of John Turner, a hat and shoe merchant whose success allowed him to build the Gothic clapboard house with 7 gables. A later owner, Samuel Ingersoll, added a secret staircase that would become infamous due to Hawthorne's novel. The haunted history of the house is thought to be due to a curse laid on Salem by those wrongly executed in the witch trials. Sightings at the mansion include a figure walking up and down the secret staircase, a ghostly boy playing in the attic, and the ghost of Ingersoll's daughter walking the halls and peering at the garden through the windows. Mackinac Island is one of Michigan's most popular destinations for tourists, full of historic buildings, unique shops, and of course their famous horses, as cars have been banned there since the 19th century. But the charming tourist spot is also widely believed to be the most haunted location in Michigan. The ghostly presences of Mackinac are largely attributed to the violent history there, as the spot was originally home to Ottawa natives, many of whom were killed as the British took over the island for their fur trade and fishing industry. Additionally, the island was home to a military fort where many people died in the War of 1812. The island's Grand Hotel is one of the most common sites for ghost spotting, including the ghosts of workers who died in its construction and a mysterious entity with glowing red eyes. Mission Point Resorts is home to Harvey, the ghost of a man who shot himself from heartbreak, unless he was murdered. Other local phenomena include phantom limbs at Fort Mackinac and witches' ghosts at the Drowning Pool. The Wabasha Street Caves are a system of artificial caves dug in the 1800s as silica mines for use in making glass. The hollowed-out area became first a mushroom farm, then a speakeasy, then a home to a nightclub frequented by gangsters, and eventually an event hall and tourist destination in St. Paul, Minnesota. It's also haunted. Besides the fact that it's a spooky underground locale, the association of the caves with restless spirits likely has to do primarily with the reputation of the Castle Royal nightclub, which was a common hangout for notorious gangsters such as John Dillinger and Babyface Nelson in the 1930s. Employees of the cave say that hauntings are a daily thing down there, with unexplained whistling, strange footsteps, flickering chandelier lights, and ghosts walking through the corridors all a common occurrence. Legends abound of slain mobsters whose bodies were hidden in the caves and whose ghosts are thought to have stuck around to whisper spookily to visitors to their old tramping grounds under the streets of St. Paul.
The men who were murdered are under this cement somewhere. You could be standing on 3 dead gangsters.
The most haunted spot in Mississippi is the McRaven house, a historic home constructed around 1797 that has a violent history. The house itself was built by Andrew Glass, a highwayman who would store his stolen plunder at McRaven house. Later, Mary Elizabeth Howard, the 15-year-old wife of the house's new owner, died in childbirth in one of the house's bedrooms. During the Civil War, the house served as a Confederate field hospital until its owner was shot just outside the home by Union troops. Eventually, the Murray family moved in, and 4 of them would die inside the McRaven house. Since 2015, the house has been open to the public. The official McRaven House Tours website says that the ghosts most commonly sighted on the grounds are Mary Elizabeth Howard, who is said to constantly turn lights on and off and appear on the staircase, and whose well-preserved shawl is said to emit a strange heat, John Bobb, the Civil War-era owner whose ghost still prowls the balcony, and Andrew Glass himself. The Lemp Mansion in St. Louis, Missouri is one of the most haunted places in the United States. The house, which is currently a dinner, theater, and bed and breakfast, was originally the family home of German beer magnate Johann Adam Lemp. The house witnessed a number of terrible tragedies, starting with the death of young Frederick Lemp, which devastated his father William so much that he shot himself inside the house in 1904. More tragic deaths and suicides plagued the family through the generations, while legend says that profligate heir William Jr. also kept an illegitimate son with Down syndrome imprisoned in the attic.
There are 9 identifiable spirits here in this house.
Today, staff members at the mansion claim to have witnessed strange apparitions and sounds, doors that lock and unlock by themselves, and a piano that plays itself. The attic is said to be home to William Jr.'s imprisoned son, and the area in the basement leading to the brewery's old caves is known as the Gates of Hell.